This is the Landlord Survival Show. When people stop being nice and shit gets real. You're the landlord. We're here to help. This is the show for what the gurus don't tell you about owning rentals. We're here for you because we're stronger together.
Brought to you by Empire Industries Property Management. Built for investors, by investors.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Landlord Survival Show. I am your host, Steve Rosenberg, and I am the owner and co-founder of Empire Industries Property Management and Realty Services. Empire, we manage about 1,000 properties. We are in Houston, we are in Dallas, we are in Fort Worth, and we are growing very aggressively across Texas. And the reason we created this show is not because we are a management company. The reason we created this show is because we are investors. I own properties, I buy properties, I sell properties. I make some good decisions, and quite honest, I make some bad decisions, and I've made my share of both. And the reason that we created this show is because I personally am tired of having people tell me all the great things about owning real estate, tell me all about how easy it is, tell me all the fluff, and no one really talks about the bad days. Nobody talks about the days that you made a mistake, the days that a vendor ripped you off, you know, a contractor didn't show up, you know, you missed your deadline, you got banks calling you. And not that that is something that you need to harp on, but I do think that that's a reality in the investing world that I think that you need to think about when you're getting involved in this. I don't think it's all, you know, sunshines and rainbows and unicorns. I think the reality is there's some harsh truth that comes in owning rental properties. You know, at the end of the business, at the end of the day, it's a people business. You know, whether you own a rental property, whether you're flipping properties, I don't care if you're doing commercial, you're in the people business and you have to deal with people. And I think you need to realize that, you know, when you own property, you know, and you're dealing with contractors and you're trying to get something done, you're trying to flip a property, there's a lot of mistakes that can happen. There's a lot of variables. And my guest today, we're going to expand on that because he does it not only from his hometown, but he does it in multiple states across the country. And so I want to kind of learn a little bit more. One of the things that we created with Empire is the Landlord Survival Handbook. We call it the Ultimate Survival Handbook. And what that is basically how we manage our properties of 1,000 properties every day is what is in this manual. So when you get into the rental business and you don't really know what to do and you want to self-manage, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think self-managing is fine. But I do think that if you're going to self-manage, you need to understand the rules of the game and you need to understand what those laws are. And part of that is knowing what fair housing laws are, what discrimination laws are, what dangerous breeds will make your property insurance company drop you. These are things that are in that manual. You know, what questions you can and cannot ask a prospective tenant because you could be violating the law. Unfortunately, these are not all the things that I knew when I was owning my first rental properties. Luckily, I never got in trouble, but they're things that I think that you should know because I don't want you to get in trouble. And so we created this manual. If you go to our website, selfmanagemyproperty.com, you can go on there, you can click on it. I've got free ebooks. I've got the manual there. We have a Facebook group, the Landlord Survival Group on Facebook. It's a growing group, and it's like-minded investors. There's no set tone. The only thing I ask is that you don't sell anything on there. This is for investors to ask questions. It's investors in multiple states and multiple countries that want to learn to do what they're doing just a little bit better. So I want to introduce my guest, just a quick introduction of how I met him. So we have a mutual friend, Tarl and Grace Yarber. They're up in Seattle, and I've met Tarl and Grace from another mutual friend. And I was fortunate enough to go and speak at Tarl's Pacific Northwest Badass Real Estate Expo this year. And great event, a lot of great people. And I met Cory. And we were there, we started talking, and I started listening to what he's doing. And I was really impressed. You know, the stuff that you're doing, the things that you've accomplished, I got to say, it's very impressive. So, Cory, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you taking the time. I know it's a little bit early where you are, and so thanks for waking up and doing this.
No problem, Steve. And I'll never forget actually the first time that we met in Tarl's. It was at Tarl's event. It was earlier this year, right? Yeah, I think it was in April or something. Yeah. But yeah, so right away I was like, I was talking to Grace. I was like, oh, who's that guy? You know, I was pointing at you. And you were already talking to my partner, Kikola.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that guy is he looks like a badass. And then sure enough, she's like, oh, and she was telling me he is like, he's a pilot, and he has all these rental properties, and he's a large company. I was like, oh, she's like, did you meet him? I was like, no. I'm usually like kind of like a shy guy, so she like basically grabbed me and like ran me across the room. It's like, hey, Steve, this is Cory. I was like, oh, thanks, Grace. Like, kind of put me right in there, so, but I was very grateful for that, because I appreciate, you and all that, you've kind of brought me in on your podcast. And I've actually been following you on Facebook, learning a lot, because we're shifting a little bit more towards passive income too,
Right.
and Grace and Taro speak highly of you. So
That's
thanks
great.
again, man.
That's great. So let's talk. First of all, let's tell everybody where you're calling from, because it's not a standard place that people would think that you're doing flipping and stuff.
Right. Well, so I'm based out of Honolulu, Hawaii, and I basically live right in downtown Honolulu. So it's about 6:10 right now in the morning, and sometimes like sirens go off because there's like I'm right in the heart of Honolulu. So if you hear anything, I apologize.
No. I've spent many flight layovers in Honolulu over at the top of Waikiki Martini Bar. So I've been there many times. The best happy hour on the island, or it was.
Yeah, no, I love that place.
It's a great city. I mean, it's just a beautiful island, and living in Guam for a couple of years and getting to know all the islands out there, the Micronesian, Marshall Islands. It's just, I love going out there. And I told you I'm going diving in Palau next week over Christmas break, so that'll be kind of cool.
That's awesome, man. Yeah.
So,
well, next time you're back in town, man, let's definitely hook up.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to. So tell everyone kind of your background, like how, how'd you get into real estate? Because you're not just doing it in Hawaii, you're doing it all over the US. So let's kind of dive into your background of how you even got into this world.
Sure. I basically kind of fell into real estate investing. I was finishing up my last year in college in Riverside, California. So Southern California. This was towards the end of 2011. So I was going through my last year in 2012. And I just kind of knew I didn't want to go the traditional route. I had this feeling I spent so much money on school and on my degree, and I just, my future that I saw, I just couldn't, I thought that there was a better way. I just didn't know. And I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and basically totally changed my mindset, mainly because everything that I was feeling, all my concerns and kind of insecurities, like, is this what really life is going to be? Like I just work every day, Monday through Friday. And
the rat race, right?
The rat race. Yeah. And so I read the book, and it kind of, everything he was telling me was like, okay, like I'm not thinking wrong. It's not wrong to feel that I don't want to work for the rest of my life. Yeah. It's not wrong to feel that way, because I came up from a traditional, I guess, upbringing where you go to school, you get a good job, and you save money and hopefully have enough in retirement to get you to the end, but I felt that wasn't for me. And so after reading the book, I got fired up because it showed me that there was another path. And so I ended up kind of just embedding in the network out there in Riverside. I went to all the meetups, and I met a couple of investors who kind of took me under their wing. And they made, my task was to door knock for them. And it was brutal,
free
like
labor,
door knocking.
They call it free labor now, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like, you really have to ask yourself when you're door knocking, it throws you into the fire, because it really challenges you to see how bad you want it. You know?
Yeah, because you're going out of your comfort zone, because like you said, you're not an outward type person to begin with, and then you're going up to these people that are vulnerable, right? You're knocking on their door if they want to, lose their house or sell their house, and now you're like they're either going to hate you or love you, basically, right? I mean, at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And it was 2012, so the market was still recovering.
Yep.
And I was tasked to knock on people's doors who were upside down. Right. And it wasn't pleasant. Like, they didn't want to really talk to anybody, let alone some kid who's knocking on their door, you know, asking if they need help and stuff like that. And, you know, it was the hardest year for me, but it was my most growth because I saw what I was made of, you know.
Nice.
And because I am an introvert, I am a shy guy, you know, and but the mentors who took me in told me from the start, it's like if you don't want it bad enough, and if you're not in it for the right reasons, then you're not gonna make it. Basically, that's what he basically told me. Like, you know, we'll part ways right now because you're gonna waste your time and you're gonna waste my time. And at first he came across very hard on me, and but he did me a favor, you know. And because when things did get hard, I just kept hearing his voice telling me, like, I'm not gonna make it, you know, because you know, some people, when they're told that they're not going to make it, they agree, you know, and they crumble and they turn small. Yeah. And, but other people, you know, and I think everybody has the chance to do this, you know, they just have to believe in themselves, basically, is when someone tells you you can't do it, that should be motivation and your fuel to prove them wrong, you know? So that was in my head the whole time. Every time I felt like I wanted to quit.
So let me ask you this now: when you made that decision, right? Like, and because I think it's important, you crossed over, like you physically made that decision and said, you know what, I'm gonna actually knock on this door. So, kind of what was going through your mind from the time you got out of your car to the time you actually knocked on that first door? What was going through your mind? Because I think a lot of people, that's the breaking point, right? I think that's the point that they go, you know what, I ain't doing this, or I don't think they're home, and they come up with an excuse. So what was going through your mind at that what was it, maybe 20 yards, right, of your life? That was your life changing, and 20 yards right there is what changed it.
Oh, man, absolutely. It sounds like you've been through that too.
Oh, I have. I've done it, man. I've done it.
Dude, yeah, because that is exactly how it goes. You park, get out of the car, you're telling yourself, nah, it looks like nobody's home. Like, I should just turn around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, your battle is a constant battle within yourself. And that's why I think I would not take it back. You know, as brutal as door knocking can be, you know, I wouldn't take it back because it really did show you know, what I was made of. And to push past that was, you know, my mentor's voice in my mind is just telling me that I'm not going to make it, you know, like, because you don't want it bad enough, you know, you need to really want it. And honestly, if he didn't tell me that up front, I probably would have turned around and came up with every little excuse. And, you know, I now I'm in the position where I'm on the other side. I'm helping people, right? And you know, I had to deal with a couple of people who I'm trying to help, and you know, they're doing marketing. I teach them, I give them my systems, and they get the calls coming in. And there's I'll never forget one of my guys, like he had a call come in, and it was a motivated seller. The seller needed to sell, but he was kind of hostile on the phone all the time, you know, and he was rude to him, and kind of the conversation was always kind of toxic. But you know, so he called me saying, hey, I think this guy really, I'm about to get him, you know, to where we need to be, but you know, I don't think I don't like calling him. And I said, you know, honestly, I have no sympathy for that, you know, because I've been through it, you know, and it was 10 times worse because I'm face to face with these people.
Yeah, at least you have a phone, you know, at least you have someone, you know, you're actually
you can hang up
talking to someone, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, like, I understand because it is tough, and nobody likes to get yelled at, or, you know, but like if you can't pick up the phone and call someone because you're afraid to get yelled at, then you're in the wrong business. Like, you know, you have to push past that, you know, otherwise I don't know what to say. You know?
Well, and I think what, you know, and you know, what's important with this, especially when people are doing this, making the calls, I think it's so important to understand that sometimes these people, they're just maybe mad at themselves, and you're the only person in front of them to take their aggression out on. So you're going to feel the brunt of it. They're not necessarily mad at you. They don't know you, right? They're just maybe mad that they got themselves in this position. Maybe they overextended themselves, whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, you're the only one in front of them, and they are going to take all of their force and fury out on you. But once they spent that, and once that's done, and they're kind of like they're out of air, the sail is out of wind, then they, a lot of times, then they'll kind of be like, okay, well, come on in and let's talk, But the first is more frustration and anger. I think that they got themselves into that position. Not that they're mad at you. They don't know you, and a lot of times people think like, oh, they don't like me because they think I'm trying to steal their house. Like that's just your mind trying to justify why you don't want to keep going. Like you said, why it's okay to stop. So let me ask you a question. When you're talking to these new people, and look, it's like me, right? It's like the old quarterback, right? You're trying to show the new quarterback how to play, and you're trying to explain to them, and you're trying to tell them, look, I've been there, I've done that. And they're like, yeah, that was the old way. This way is much harder. We're different,
Right.
How do you mentally get them past that point? Because you can only tell someone so many times, do it. And at one point, you got to kind of say, hey, get off the pot. At some point you got to take action, So how do you get them to that? And then how do you make the decision that, this person's why is just not strong enough, and I don't have the time or energy to get them to that why? How do you do that?
Oh, that's a good question. And it's hard because every person is different, and everybody, some people need the tough love, and then some people need a little bit more encouragement, and for this person, I told him, I'm only telling you this because this is what my mentor told me. And honestly, I needed to hear that. I needed his voice in my ear telling me I'm not going to make it if I can't push past my shyness or my being introverted and being out there and knocking on doors and being afraid of, having doors slammed in my face or being cussed at,
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, so, I'm telling you this because it helped me. And I wasn't nearly as tough on him as my mentor was tough on me, but I still told him that, look, if you can't push past this, then you should rethink why you're doing this, because if you're afraid of getting on the phone, then it's hard to do any business,
Yeah. I mean, like I said, everything's a people business. And one thing someone told me a long time ago, which it rings true with all of this, and it's that it doesn't get easier. You just get better. So
yes,
the people are not in any less messed up positions than they were when you were doing it. You're just better at it. And so it's like when I talk to people and I negotiate, they're like, man, they give me all the reasons why it worked for me. And I'm like, no, it's not any easier than what you deal with. My people are not purple and yours are green. They're all the same people. I'm just a little bit better because I've been doing it longer. That's the reality of it, And so it's you're going from a doer to an educator, and now you go from an operator to basically you're going to being a leader. And when you're a leader, that's where you got to say, okay, you know what? A leader inspires and gets people to follow you. An operator just says, get out of the way, I'll do it. Which you could probably very easily say, you know what? I'll make the call. I'll close the deal. I don't need you. But that's not the goal of what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, that just gives you more work, and that's not, which is why the other guys would use you to do the bird dogging or whatever they called it back then to say, hey, go knock on doors, and they're leveraging you. That you're learning lifelong experience, and they're getting some work. They're getting some pressure relief valve of them not having to do it. So it's very much win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does take encouragement too on with some people, they need that a cheerleader in their corner and somebody who is backing them, so it is a tough balance between, if you're really trying to lead somebody and help someone, it's a tough balance between, being hard on them because when you have to, but also helping them along the way when you have to,
Yeah.
So it's tough to lead. I mean, I followed my, over more than half my life because I was following a system and people and teachers and coaches, but when you shift to entrepreneurship and you're trying to run a business in any industry, it's it's a different dynamic, and you have to understand people, and like you said, relationships, and know how to lead. And that's something that I had to learn from other people, like mentors and, other people in our industry, like yourself and like Taro guys. Like I take inspiration and, from everybody.
So let me ask you this now, and I'm sure, you're out in LA, you're in Riverside, your family's back in Hawaii. So you're telling them that this is what you're doing. What kind of conversations were that? Because, it's hard to break old mindsets, and, when, growing up a certain way, traditional way. I mean, my growing up, my mom and dad worked, all the time. And it wasn't an entrepreneurial family. So now their kid is over in the States on the mainland, and all of a sudden he's flipping properties. How do those conversations go?
Right. Well, I'm very fortunate to come from a family that supports me, no matter what. I have a large family too. So, but yeah, it's like, even myself, I didn't want to really tell everybody what I'm doing, because it's,
like, oh, he's in real estate now. Oh, okay. Yeah. I can see that,
Right. Yeah. And honestly, I was so new, so like I couldn't really explain it to the ability that I can today. So, it was just,
what
I was
are you
very
doing?
careful.
I don't know. I really don't know what I'm doing. I'm just knocking on doors right now. That's all I'm doing.
Right. Yeah. And I was, so what they had me doing was knocking on doors. They were flipping jumbo loans. So notes. Gotcha. They were flipping notes. And so like the target market, or the people who I was knocking on, were people who were, had jumbo loans. So a lot of these houses were $1 million houses,
Yeah, they're not small.
And I'm like, yeah. And so even more so, I'm kind of like, what am I doing here? Like talking to like these people, but it was definitely tricky, because I would tell my family that I was very close to, when I needed support, over the phone and stuff. But for the most part, I just kind of went, and I didn't really think about, telling others who are in my circles.
They say you didn't give them the opportunity to be like, what are you doing? Why you went to college?
Yeah.
Degree? Why would you, and that's the challenge, right? That's a challenge we all go through. We all have our friends we grew up with. I mean, I grew up in Los Angeles. I've got friends that grew up in Los Angeles, still live in Los Angeles. And they're kind of like, what are you doing? Why, you're an airline pilot. Why are you even doing real estate? You can't explain it, right? It's like, why do you grind every day? I do it because I love doing it. I love grinding and I love working, man. That's just what I do. It's like, if you have to explain it to people, they're not going to understand. So it's like, why even try, right? Why even go down that path?
Right. I rather, and of course, once they see you doing, then the questions come. And, like, I rather the questions come from my results, but you still kind of want to tell someone, have some sounding board, right? So like, yeah, I mean, family is always there for me, which I'm very fortunate.
That's good. I learned. I remember listening to like a Grant Cardone, and they said that first they encourage you, then they ridicule you, then they admire you. So it's like, first they're like, oh yeah, go ahead and go, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, he's probably doing something wrong or illegal, or he's gonna lose everything, and all of a sudden, as you keep going, you're just grinding every day, focused, and as you're going, and the next thing you know, they're like, how are you doing that? Like, wow, you are successful. And it's like, there's no magic pill. It's just action. I mean, that's the one word I could say that people ask me what has caused our success and what I do. I'm like, it's just action. I just take massive action. I do not stop or let up the gas pedal ever. I am constantly moving forward,
Yes. Yeah.
So let's flash forward a little bit. So you started doing that. You got your feet wet. You started doing the notes. So where did you go from here in your progress?
So I was doing that in my last year of college, and once I finished that, I kind of wanted to stay. But I did miss home, and so I figured, what, let's move back. I moved back home, and I knew I needed more training. So I kind of just went to the local meetup groups. I found some mentors, worked with them. I started out wholesaling, and I wholesaled my first 3 deals to a mentor of mine. His name is Jonah Kogan. And to this day, I work with him. He's a developer and a house flipper. And before I do anything crazy, You know, like there's a few people who I call, you know, and like Jonah's one of them. You know, I think it's important to have people like that in your life who will tell you straight. And I think it's also important to make sure that, you know, you keep your circle tight where, and you're not surrounded by yes men or yes women, you know, who just want to tell you what you want to hear. You know, I think we need that little bit of fear, and the people who will tell you straight, like, that's a bad idea, or,
that's,
you know,
stupid. Like, that's stupid. Don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. So I have a few people like that in my life, and unfortunately Jonah is one of them. But I hosted my first 3 deals to him, and he like let me come along for the ride to help him with the project so I could learn. And I've learned, you know, house flipping through him, and development as well now. And I learned so much, you know, because development is a whole nother beast, man.
That's a whole other, I mean, that's like, you know, different categories of, I mean, just huge different categories. I mean, which I don't even know developing. That's way beyond my level of knowledge and expertise, for sure.
Yeah, it's even the way you finance it. I mean, just like anything else, right? Like house flipping is a different way you finance it, development, and then also taking down like syndications and stuff. I mean, it's all something, and that's where I'm actually moving to that space. So I'll probably reach out to you, Steve, because you know, I'd love to, you know, learn from you, you know. So that'd be great.
Yeah. So let's talk about this transition that you're back in Hawaii and you're learning. Any mistakes? Any you know, gotchas that you're like, now that you look, you're like, that was obvious, but at the time, you know, you don't know what's coming around the next corner because you've never been down the road, right? So what kind of challenges did you run up against on that?
Well, major mistakes for me. I know early on I missed out on a bunch of deals because I didn't know how to structure them at first. And looking back, I was like, wow, yeah, I probably missed out on a lot of money because I just didn't know how to structure certain deals. And that's part of it, you know, like because I started marketing, you know, and at least at that point, I was a little bit more comfortable with talking to people because of my, you know, what I went through in California. But it was still hard on the phone, you know, like making sure you're communicating, and you're trying to negotiate, but at the same time build rapport with the sellers. Like it was, I missed out on a bunch of deals just because I couldn't structure them properly. But once I shifted from wholesaling to fixing and flipping, there's been mistakes, big mistakes, and they've cost us, you know, money. But fortunately, the fundamentals that I was taught were strong enough that our margins are big enough where we can make errors, you know. Mm-hmm. And now that's why we only take down deals with thick margins, because it never goes according to plan.
Because there's always variables that you can't control.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you go over their time frame, go over budget, you rip open the walls, and like all the structural has to be replaced because termites out here in Hawaii. Yeah. So it's, you know, a project never goes according to plan. And I think early on I made mistakes, assuming that they would. I would make the numbers work. Yeah. You know, and
mentally you're going, I can make this work. I can, you know, shave off here, shave off there to make it look like a deal. And then the reality comes in and you're like, okay, that was just what I was, the numbers actually were correct when I looked at them the first time, is what I've always learned from me.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, because when you first start out, you want the first deals, you know, and you make the numbers work.
Emotionally, you want to make it work, and you'll talk yourself. You become the best salesman yourself, right? You convince yourself that you can make the deal work. I mean, I've done it many, many times, and I convince myself, my business partner, and it's just, you know, I mean, I finally learned that there's just some things that I suck at doing, you know, that I'm not good at that. Like, I'm good at negotiating. I'm not good at estimating. I'm not good at being practical as to what costs are, because I can be like, oh, that'll be fine. We can figure that out. We'll figure that out on the way. Let's keep rolling. Let's lock it up, you know?
Right. Yeah.
You know? So let me ask you, is it, in your opinion, and, you know, you do stuff in Hawaii, and then we'll talk about what you're doing here in the U.S., I mean, in the mainland. Do you see it a little bit harder being in Hawaii because you're on the island and there's, obviously things are a lot more expensive and, you got some lag time, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Hawaii is definitely a different market. And it's challenging because things do move a little slower out here. They're way more expensive. We could pay like close to $1 million for a teardown. And I mean, I just put a piece of property in Kaneohe, which is on the windward side, the east side of the island. We're buying it. It's basically a teardown but we're buying it for $800,000. We'll put 120,000 into it, and in 45 to 60 days, we'll be back on market, listed around 1.2. So, but that's kind of an average deal, to be honest, and so Hawaii is it's a high price point market. It's very competitive. It's very much so like Seattle, the Seattle area, and but with that said, since there is thick margins, the profit's bigger, but our market is not suited for cash flow, because of the high price points to buy in, the return is just not there. Right.
So let me ask you, obviously you live there, but why does it make sense to do business there, in your opinion? I mean, besides from living there, obviously, and people don't get the ability like you do to travel and come back to the mainland and stuff, but what's your thoughts on that? Because you keep staying there, you stay there and you keep doing business, so there's a reason for it.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, it is home, and I can't picture myself living anywhere else anymore. Yeah. But I'm very fortunate because our market is very attractive for house flippers like myself and developers. Development, I mean, I think if you can develop here in Hawaii, you can probably develop anywhere. You can probably figure it out anywhere because they're so sensitive to development out here, which they should, rightfully so, because it is an island. There's cultural. You have to be sensitive to the culture, sure. And the lands, because it is limited, and there's sacred land out here. So, but with that said,
it's already crowded as it is in Honolulu. I mean, there's traffic. I mean, there's a lot of traffic there.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? So development is hard out here, but like flipping houses and developing out here, the profit is so much bigger right? Money. I mean, I don't have to do more than 10 deals to, make over $1 million, and it's very, I don't want to say it's not easy. I'll say that it's definitely not easy. It's a tough gig. It's very competitive out here. The inventory is very low, but if you can figure it out, you can make really good money here. You can be a millionaire easy.
Just the fact that you created you've got the funneling, you've got the systemization. It sounds like that you've been able to make it, and obviously you're offsetting that with mainland stuff. But it sounds like because of that, it works, and obviously you're home, so it's obviously easier. And staying in Hawaii is easier than hopping out to California or Seattle all the time. You got to have a meeting or something, which, as we know, that gets old after a while.
Yeah, and everything's close. I can get to anywhere on this island within like 45 minutes to an hour, so like I sometimes I check out all my job sites, in a day. And whereas like if I was maybe in your market or something, it's kind of hard, right? Like, yeah. I'm sure they're far out, right? You got to kind of plan that.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. So when you're doing deals and you got multiple deals, is it the bandwidth of the multiple deals, or is it how much money you've outlaid that is the restrictor for you?
For me, we have strong deal flow. So for me, it's more capacity. What's our capacity in a sense of operations? Like, is our crew tapped out? Like, will we have to go hire, another crew that we necessarily haven't worked too much with, right. Which is rare, but we are starting to do that. And then the other thing is funds too, right? Sure. We always are looking for private capital. We have millions of dollars out there, amongst our projects, because one deal alone, you might have to bring up like over $1 million, like the one I just talked about, where that raise is going to be right under $1 million.
Pumping a little bit when all of that's sitting in one small house. It's not like you're buying a project of, a bunch of cash flow. I mean, you're taking a lot of money and you're putting it there, and obviously your expertise and knowledge makes you feel a little more comfortable. But look, I know the feeling. At the end of the day, when you sign on that, it's like, this is me, man. I'm owning this, and it's like,
Yeah.
I bet, when you're wrong, like you said, when you're wrong in your numbers, it's like, I hope this punch doesn't hurt as much as I think it's going to hurt. I'm projecting it not to be that bad, but it's going to hurt. And, sometimes, as we know, sometimes those punches hurt a lot more than other ones,
Yes. And and we are trained, we take calculated risks, right?
Right.
And, but like, still it hits you sometimes, like slaps me across the face every once in a while, where it's like the heaviness of the debt comes down on you. It's like, wow, like, yeah, if I mess this up, I am toast.
Yeah.
Right. And like, every time I hand the keys over to the contractors or something, it's like, my life is in your hands, dude.
Yeah.
Like,
talk
seriously.
about trust, right? There's a lot of trust there, trust but verify, but there's still at some levels trust. So tell everyone what you're doing now. So now you're doing a lot of stuff. I see you do stuff in Seattle, and you got something going on in Vegas too, right?
Yeah. So Seattle, we're also flipping over there, and that's another good point of why it's good to make sure you have, you're thinking ahead and you're making thick margins, because the market has pulled back in Seattle quite a bit. And if it wasn't for us being conservative on the front end, we could have got stung, pretty hard.
Yeah.
But we're in Seattle. We have a lot of money out there deployed now. And then we are looking to move into Vegas. We're looking at a bunch of deals out there. Those are more deals that we may hold for a couple of years, 2 to 3 years out there. And then some more multifamily, more commercial deals on that side. So we're taking some of our cash and we're going to be dumping it into more long-term holds. But in Vegas, probably not too long, maybe 5 years at the most. If we get into something big out there, we will probably just be in between maybe 2 to 5 years or something like that.
Got it. So let me ask you, what are kind of your long-term goals? Like where's this going? Where's Cory in 10 years from now?
My long-term goals is basically freedom. I love flipping houses. I would not trade it for the world, but it's super active income. Like, it's not just active income.
It's a job.
It's a job. And like,
job.
I'm on 24/7, and it's, at least a 9 to 5, that's active income, I guess, but you're 9 to 5, I'm like, when you work a 9 to 5, you clock in, you clock out. When you flip houses, you don't clock out,
Right.
and until the thing is done. And then there's the next one, and then the next one. And you're managing contractors, and you got some deals that are closing. So you're managing escrow, you're managing lenders, everybody, stagers, photographers, like,
it runs through the whole thing. It doesn't just stop when you're done flipping the house and you get it ready. It's funny, like, you watch these TV shows. I always laugh because you watch these shows and it's like, oh yeah, the house, we made the deadline, it's all great. It's like, you still got to get the house ready. You got to find a buyer. They got to get money. You got to close. That's just the first third or quarter of the transaction.
Right, exactly. And like, my guys, like my crew, they don't see that side, right? No. Like, I'm like they just see us. Oh, here's a new project. Go get after it.
Yeah.
And like, they don't see like how much work we do on the front to putting the funds together, closing, like that's. Like, so I told my general contractor, because one time he's like, hey man, I feel like I never see you, I'm like, well, dude, like, what my dealings with you is like 20% of what I do.
Yeah. You think this is all, it's like, I don't just, it's funny. A lot of people, when they think of the investor, they think it's this guy just running around to Home Depot. He's ordering his crews around and he's done, and it's like, that's just a piece of this whole puzzle. And I think that's why a lot of investors fail, is they don't they don't realize, like, hey, you got to be able to market this property. You got to understand some online advertising. You got to understand, there's so many different pieces. You have to wear so many different hats when you do what you do. And I don't think people realize that they don't understand that it's not just getting a house ready. Making a house pretty does not sell itself. I hate to tell people that. It just doesn't happen. And, you know, I'm sure, which I'd like to hear, some horror stories, if you will. Because again, I always tell you, you know, everybody talks about how great they are and how much money, and I got millions here, millions there, and this. But let me ask you this. Let's hear something that you go, man, that was just a total mistake. That was a catastrophe. And that was one of those days that I just did not want to get out of bed because I knew it was coming. You got to have one of those, right?
Oh yeah, and I think if any investor that tells you that they don't have one of those, they probably haven't done it long enough, or they're lying.
Investor. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, oh gosh, I'm trying to figure out the craziest day. I've had some days where I'm fortunate that I do have partners, so like I get, you know, you share the highs and the lows. Absolutely. With them.
Sometimes it's a partner problem, you know. Sometimes it's not seeing eye to eye on a project, you know.
Yeah, and that could be it too, because me and my partner, the dynamic between us, we're very different in a lot of ways. He's more extroverted. I'm more introverted. Yep. I feel he's more aggressive, although he probably feels that I'm more aggressive sometimes, but you know, he's a little bit more aggressive in charging forward, punching through. I'm a little bit more conservative, but it's a good balance, right? So, and the good thing is that there's always compromise, and you know, we always, you know, come meet in the middle. But when it comes to the times where things get crazy, like I'm trying to think of the most recent one. We had a closing in Kailua, which is on the windward side, the east side of Oahu, and we had a house, a beautiful house. We just finished the remodel, everything went good, and all of a sudden we got our utility bills, and they were like massive, like almost $4,500 for like the water and the electric. So like, what's going on? You know, like we fixed the pool. So like, is it the pump? You know, like, is the pump not running correctly? And so we're trying to scramble because we're supposed to close, and we have to disclose this to the sellers. Like, hey, sorry, like the utility bill, we don't know what it is. We're looking for it. Took us a while, and come to find out the water heater, a pipe burst under the house. Ooh. And like, it was hot water. So not only was it leaking a ton of water for like probably over, I don't know, a few weeks, you know.
Wow. And like, but it was hot water, so it was being heated.
It was hot water, so the water heater kept going and going. And for us, it's not so much like the $8,000 that we have to pay for utilities. Right. It's more like we might lose this buyer, and it might cost us a ton of money to fix this thing. You know, yeah. Like, so a deal that had like well over six-figure profit. Now we're thinking, I don't know how much this is going to cost us if we lose
just gotta
this
get
buyer.
Out of this. We got to save the deal and take whatever we can.
Yeah. So like sometimes you get those calls and you just want to hug. You know, it's like, I just want to hug, dude. Yeah.
I've had that where you're going to the closing and you're all happy, and you get that phone call that the guy's backing out, or he couldn't get funding, and you're just like, I mean, it just feels like a sledgehammer hits you in the chest, man. You know, I mean, talk about I don't think people realize the emotional highs and lows in this business. And I've done it, and I'll tell you what, man, it can hit you in the face very, like you said, man. Next thing you know, you're going from this high of a couple, you know, six figures to man, I just want to get this thing across the goal line. I'll whip it across. I don't care what it takes. We don't want this to become a bigger problem, you know? So, but one last thing I have, and I appreciate your time. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give people on partnerships? Because look, a lot of people, they don't have the money or they don't have the experience, and they decide, you know what, I met this one guy at a RIA meetup, and we're going to partner, and this is going to be great. You know, I know the reality of those, but what's your take on them?
My take is partnerships just have to be very careful, because even for me, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a serial entrepreneur. Like I get ideas all the time, and I have the shiny object syndrome sometimes, you know, and I want to do this, I want to do that. And, but when you have a partner, now you both are responsible towards each other, you know? So like, if I if I get an idea and I want to go do something, start a food truck or something like that, like I need to be conscious that that might affect my partner, and vice versa. So partnerships, I feel have to, before they are ever official, you have to make sure what you bring to the table, what they bring to the table. Is it a good match? Because it could be the best thing you've ever done is partner, or it could be a huge nightmare, So just my advice is just to make sure that you're compatible on both sides, and just because you may be opposite from your partner doesn't mean that it won't work. It means that actually it might help in a lot of ways,
Absolutely.
And my partner, Kikoa, who you met, he negotiates in a totally different way. And so his style fits a lot of people, better than my style, and vice versa. Like a lot of ways, like I negotiate a lot of ways better than he does with some other type of personality, and it's good because when we're both in the room, then we can fire on all cylinders,
Yes.
right? So there's a good match. So just because we're very different doesn't mean that it's not a good match, but I think what keeps our partnership strong is that we are very close, we're friends, and there's always understanding and compromise,
Yeah. And that's great. I've had my business partner. I mean, we met buying an apartment complex back in 2005. And we joke, I mean, we're more intertwined with real estate and bank accounts than our wives. I mean, it's like we could take each other down like that because we know so much of the inner workings of our finances. And, I would say the one thing that has made our success is we stay in our lane. I don't step on his toes. He doesn't step on my toes. He has a specific, unique ability, and I have my own. And we've learned that, obviously we butt heads like brothers, and, the proverbial F you, okay, well, let's go. But we've learned that we respect each other, and we always are thinking what's best for the business, not what's best for Steve, not what's best for Pete, what's best for the business or what's best for the future. And that may mean that we have to sacrifice, and maybe we have to do something that we may not agree with, but it's the best thing for the company. And we put that first. And I think you have to, whenever you have a partnership, I think you have to not only talk about the good things, but I think you have to have a conversation of, okay, if we get divorced, how does this look? Like, how does the divorce look? How do we separate our assets? And a lot of people don't want to talk about that, but that's the problem. It's like, if you don't talk about that, when it happens, or if it happens, that's when it gets ugly. And it's because you never discuss it. So I tell people, you know what? You got to talk about the ugly shit. I mean, you got to bring the ugly dragon out and say, if we get divorced, we need to figure out how we separate. Now, I hope we never do, but we need to have that button to go, okay, it's time to separate capsules, Yeah.
And, I was told this from a friend of mine who's actually a partner with us. His name is Matt. And he told me, because sometimes there's that awkward moment, like, okay, let's talk equity, like about this deal. Everything else is gravy. Like, oh yeah, and then you like, okay, let's talk about how we're going to structure this operating agreement. And he's told me something that I'll never forget. And he said, great contracts make for great friendship, and like, if it's not about, if you're friends with someone, it's not about, oh, I'm friends with you, so like, we don't have to sign a contract. It's like, no, I'm friends with you, so we are going to sign a contract.
It's like, I don't want to jeopardize our friendship. I want to put this at a different, I need to compartmentalize that. I need to put this over here, and we need to respect the fact that it's a business, because if we let those two cross over, that's where there's problems. If we say, you know what, we're friends, but you know what, this is business, and as look, as long as I do what I say I'm going to do and you do what you say you're going to do, we're not going to have a problem. But you got to respect that business relationship. Completely agree with you, 100%. Yeah. And if they don't want to, that could be a red flag to you as a business owner, going, you know what, maybe I shouldn't do this with this person, because if we're having good times, like we're dating, right? Once we're married and we're not getting along, what happens then, right? We're in the dating phase. And I had a buddy of mine, he had about 1,200 units in Houston, and he had about 70 partners and different complexes. And he said, if I could get rid of every single one of them, I would. He said, it's like, and you know, he made a lot of mistakes in the operating agreements. He said, it's like you're dating someone for a couple days, then you marry them and you find out that person's crazy. He goes, and they're calling you all night. They think you're ripping them off, or this or that, you know, and he's like, I didn't set expectations in the beginning of how the deal would go. And he goes, the deal was actually making the amount of money that they said they were going to do, but they still thought that I was ripping them off. He goes, and they were making it toxic for the other partners. And so it was making my life miserable just dealing with all the people that were now questioning if I had ethics and this and that, because somebody, you know, had an issue that they thought that they should get more than what was even presented, you know, and it's just, so that's the downside of partnerships. And I tell people, look, for every positive, there's a negative. So, you know, partnerships can be great, but they can also be very ugly. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very important to have everything laid out in writing, because, and it may not even be that people are malicious about it. It's just we forget, you know, it's communication. Like things get lost in verbal translation. Like you need it in writing. And when you see your signature at the bottom of that and you read through what you signed, it's like, wow, yeah, I did agree to that. Like, you're right. You know, like that's how you keep a friendship, you know, like, so
because you make it non-emotional. You make it about business. Yeah, it's like, look, this is non-emotional. Let's make sure you're comfortable. If you're not, then back out, because I want you to be comfortable. And I agree so much. So, Cory, before we go, and again, thanks so much for getting up and doing this. What advice would you have people that are getting into this business? And also, if you wouldn't mind just maybe, you know, sharing your contact information if people ever want to reach out to you or you know, pick your brain a little bit or something like that.
Sure. No, well, thank you for the opportunity, Steve. This is awesome. And I would say my advice to people getting into, or who are kind of sitting on the sidelines and want to get in to investing in real estate is first find out what your strengths are, what you can offer, you know, and everybody has something to offer. And, you know, I think the way I got started is I kind of just went to the meetups, started like talking to people, even though I was the shy guy sitting in the back of the room, you know, like I would consider it a win at the time if I just talked to one person, you know, but that one person could be the guy to change your life, the guy or girl, you know, like but what I would say is, what value can you bring to somebody else, you know, and everybody has value. You have strengths everywhere. Maybe you're a tech guy and know how to set up websites, and you go to one of these meetups and an investor needs a website set up. You can do that for him. Maybe you do it for free so that you can, you know, learn from him, and that you provide value, you know, to other people. And in return, I always feel you should give first, and in return you get back, you know, and there will, when you have that mindset, things happen a lot faster, in my opinion. Your network grows stronger because people want to work with you and they stay with you. So I think it's important to come from a sense of abundance and giving, because it opens so many more doors for you. And like, I was just talking to Kiko about, like, you know what, man, like if we lost everything today, if we lost our deal flow, all of our lenders, you know, our capital to do more deals, I'd be fine, because our network is so strong and filled with great people that there will be opportunities, you know. So it's social capital, basically, you know. It's like there is value in the people you surround yourself with. Like, I know I got my man Steve up there in Dallas, you know, or all over the world, man. You know, maybe I need an evac or something across the bed. I call you, man.
Never know, right? You never know what city I'm going to pop up in next.
Right. Yeah. So I would just suggest, come from a place of giving, find out what value you can bring. Is it sweat equity? Is it money that you can provide? And give it to somebody who is looking for what you got. And then things start happening, you know. So that's my best, the best thing I can give advice I can give to someone who's getting started.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Now, Cory, if somebody wanted to find you online, on the internet, website, how do they find you?
Sure. I actually really like just Facebook and Instagram, because I don't know, I can interact with people, messages and stuff, and I post like pictures of what we're doing and stuff like that. So on Facebook and Instagram, it's just Cory, Cory, dot Nemoto. That's N as in Nancy, E, M as in Mary, O-T-O, on both, Facebook and Instagram. And just, you guys, anyone can message me, and, I'll try to get back to everybody. So, no, what we say in Hawaii is no shame.
There you go. Well, Cory, thank you so much for being on the show, man. I really appreciate it. I know a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this because, you're out there grinding, man. You're not only doing it in Hawaii, you're doing it on the mainland, and I'm sure we're going to see more of you on the scene in different states and different cities as your mind opens and as opportunities start, appealing to you. So I look forward to, and maybe Tara will ask us both to come back to the event in Seattle.
I hope so.
You never know.
I would love to. Yeah. And well, thank you, Steve. It was a pleasure, man. And I take a lot of inspiration actually from following you on Facebook. And you had a great post about your son who just took down a deal.
Yeah.
How old is he again?
14. Well, he's 15 now, but he was 14.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
I take so much inspiration from that.
And the thing about that was he actually came to me and he said, Dad, I want to buy a house. And I'm like, okay. He's like, well, how much money do you have? And he's like, $10,000. I'm like, thinking to myself, how'd you get $10,000? Like, so he's like, I've been saving all my money and gifts and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay. I go, well, that's not enough money. And this is the thing that was most important. So just so you know, like he goes to the gym with me. Like I bring him with me on places, and he hears me speaking and radio shows and stuff. But every time I'm in my car, I'm listening to an audio, whether it's Grant Cardone, Andy Frisella.
Right.
I'm listening to audiobooks all the time. So he listens. He just sits there. He never says a word, but he listens. And I don't really think that he's getting anything out of it, which was my mistake. And he said, well, and so I said, well, you don't have enough money. And he said, well, Dad, how do I get enough money? Mm-hmm. I thought, that's an interesting question. I said, well, you've got some options. He said, what are they? I said, well, you can save another $10,000 and come up with, 10, 20% down. He goes, well, I'm 14 now. That'll make me 28. I want to have more properties by then. I'm like, okay. I said, well, you can get a partner. I said, you can partner with someone. And he said, well, what does that mean? I said, well, somebody comes in and you split the deal and you go 50-50 or whatever the amount is. And you're a partnership. And I said, when you do distributions, meaning, you distribute the cash flow,
right?
It's equally that way. And I said, then if you ever sell the property, the equity is distributed also. So he's like, well, who would do that? And I said, well, I'll do it with you. And he said, you'll partner with me? And I said, yeah. He said, okay. And I said, but the deal is, and I said, you have to run the numbers and decide whether or not it's a good deal or bad deal. I said, and you have to look at the cash flow every month, and you got to look at, the expenses and this and that. So he does it, man. He we analyzed the deal. We looked at it. The equity position was not good, but it wasn't great, I should say. But it was a completely rent-ready property that we rented in 4 days. Makes a good amount of cash flow. He gets the cash flow so he can buy his knives and stuff that he does, but he's saying that he's getting money from it. So now he's like, I want to buy another rental property. So he understands the concept that he's getting it, which to me, you can't teach that, right? I mean, I couldn't teach it to him, sitting him down. He learned it just by watching what I do and, seeing the rental properties and the ones that I own. And, so that was an inspiration to me to go, man, I actually thought of creating a course so that parents could teach their kids how to buy their rental properties. Because look, I grew up in Los Angeles, you grew up in Hawaii. If we bought properties there 30 years ago when we were kids, think of what those would be worth today, right? So I tell people, I go, it's 30 years ago right now for your children. Why don't you teach your children how to buy properties? I mean, if my kid buys 10 properties, what would those things be worth in 30, 40 years, Right.
Yeah.
So,
but and you know what? That's even more inspiring to hear, like what you just said, like the way he came about it,
absolutely.
On his own. So I that's impressive, man. And I just want to thank you. And I'll probably be reaching out to you, dude. Like because I definitely want to dive in a little deeper with you, and I appreciate you.
Next time I'm on a layover in Honolulu, I'm going to look you up, and we'll go out and you can show me some of your projects.
Yes, please. Yeah, hit me up for sure.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Steve.
All right, Cory. Well, thanks for being on, everybody. I appreciate you listening to the show, and we will be back. Well, not next week because it's a holiday. We will be back the week after on the New Year. So, everybody, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
This is the Landlord Survival Show. When people stop being nice and shit gets real. You're the landlord. We're here to help. This is the show for what the gurus don't tell you about owning rentals. We're here for you because we're stronger together.
Brought to you by Empire Industries Property Management. Built for investors, by investors.